hey, become like a multimillionaire in 90 days.
You have no idea what you're doing, basically ever, at any phase of entrepreneurship. I was so clueless and I was in so much pain.
The death of the dream. You're so emotionally, mentally invested. You're grieving this vision that you saw for yourself.
I believe that it takes at least 5 years for you to really know at all what you're doing as an entrepreneur.
Nothing in my life that has ever been an accomplishment or that ended up being something that brought me fulfillment came from me having a plan for it first.
When there's an agenda, we can limit ourselves for what we think is possible. You're not racing with anybody. You're certainly not racing with yourself. You're not running out of time. You're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Hello, you guys, and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we are talking with an incredible guest, Neal, and today's episode is really, it is so real, it is so raw, and it was just such a deep conversation that I think is going to be so incredibly powerful for you. We talk all things success, failure, and also what it truly looks like to rebuild after a failure. And today, being joined by Neal, I just have to tell you a little bit about him because he's absolutely incredible. He is an entrepreneur, performance strategist, and the founder of Integrity First Funding, one of the fastest growing capital consulting companies, helping entrepreneurs to secure $50,000 to $250,000 plus in business funding. What makes Neal's story so powerful isn't just what he's building now, but truthfully, it is everything that he has gone through. He has forged through adversity from Division I soccer career that was cut short due to an injury to battling addiction, overdosing, and to becoming and building a 7-figure supplement company that eventually went bankrupt due to predatory funding. Neal has lived through the kind of losses that, I'm going to be honest, in today's story, would make most people quit. And instead of staying down, he rebuilt his life and business from nothing. And that season shaped the values that define his leadership today: extreme ownership, humility, discipline, compassion, and relentless commitment to excellence. And so I want to tell you a little bit in listening today what you're going to get, because this conversation was incredibly moving for me. And I literally, so much so that I came back and watched this episode myself after the recording because I found it so incredibly insightful from the things he shared. There's so many one-liners in it. Why the moment you win in business doesn't actually feel winning at all, and the painful truth about what it actually feels like when you hit your first million. His perspective shifting insight that you can do anything, but you can't do everything, and why ambitious people really struggle the most with that reality. We discuss the hidden danger of taking extreme ownership and why you are responsible. You are also having to say you were responsible and what the cost truly is of playing big. We talk about the physical transformation of literally changing his identity after addiction and why he gained 90 pounds as a bodybuilder and became a completely different person, not just physically, but mentally. He discusses a leadership lesson that most entrepreneurs miss: the difference between leading people, of inspiring intrinsic motivation, versus managing people, such as organizing tasks, and why confusing the two is often capping people's growth. And we also discuss his brutal wake-up call about predatory funding that cost him a 7-figure business, where he talks about that he owed $2,000 just for waking up in the morning, and how pain actually became his mission to help other entrepreneurs to avoid the same trap. Neal, I will say, is somebody that I had the absolute pleasure of meeting in person. I got to be able to meet him at an event and to see his energy and share small parts of his story there, but really be able to go into it in such a deeper level in this episode. This is an episode you will walk away inspired, moved, and truly in a deep state of reflection, as I was, which caused me to come back to it. So with all of that being said, I can't wait for you to meet Neal, and I will see you in the episode. So without further ado, let's get started. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, I am so excited for today's interview and today's guest in general, because I was just saying to him before we press record that I was diving into his story. And while he has a lot of incredible highlights and accolades, his story and the actual journey, I feel like, on how he got to this place and the insights and takeaways along the way are going to be so insanely valuable for you. And I can't wait to dive in. So Neal, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I know I was just saying this to you, I think, when anyone researches you, they're going to see this highlight that you see in a newspaper, in a magazine of 10 million, and they go, okay, whoa. Like, and instantly I feel like that can feel really impressive, of course, as it is. But I think there's a lot of context before that, and there's also a lot of context after that. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess I want to rewind first to talk about you in the early stages, you growing up, because I think that when we see these big numbers or big achievements that anyone's been able to do, as you have, most people wonder, like, is he just wired different? Did he have, an upper hand? Did he have a handout from somebody? Like, what do I need to be, do, have to achieve what he's done? And I'm curious, like, growing up, what did that look like? Did you have kind of this knowing that you were going to be this incredible success, or, what did that look like when you were growing up?
That's a really interesting question. That's actually a really cool place to start, right? Because like, yeah, like when we look at anything someone accomplishes, right? Like there is a story behind that, right? And that 10 million is obviously what I've sold with my supplement company, which no longer exists. But I mean, like, I think that anyone and Kate, you correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think anyone that becomes an entrepreneur, like kind of has a knowing that there's something a little different about them. So I think growing up, I always knew that I had something different about me. Now, was it that like that special gene, if you will? No, it was probably a lot of doubt, to be honest with you. A lot of like fear, a lot of like, what if I'm not good enough? But there was also this persistence that I always had. And like, I think personally, the thing that's attributed to any success I've ever had has not really been a particular like talent or a particular skill set, but more so just a unquenchable, if that's a word, desire to just keep
Yeah.
going, right? And so I think just being younger, I always kept going. Even in my adulthood, I just always keep going. But this is a fascinating question. Did I know there was something different? Yes. But I don't think it was like anything that most of us entrepreneurs don't believe we have, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know,
Well, like,
always,
your family was your family, I guess, like, obviously looking at the success you've had, or just, like, frankly, the opportunities that you've been involved with. Was that something that when you grew up, your family had talked about, it was really normal? Or was this kind of like, for me at least, my upbringing was like the classic five-step plan. Like, you
yeah,
go to school, you get a degree, you go get a job, you make six figures, white picket fence, husband, dog, kids, boom, you're done. Like, that
yeah,
was what you made it if you achieved that. And I think for me, I never even got curious about anything else because I just was like, okay, that's the way. And I kind of feel like for me, I was indirectly along the way, slowly these pivots put me in a different path because none of the traditional stuff, like, I wasn't traditionally smart when it came to, university and things like that
mm,
in the traditional school system. I was very creative, very like just like innovative, kind of wanting to do my own thing, which now has served me very well. But
yeah,
at the time, that was not like, entrepreneurship was not something that I ever thought of, but I
yeah.
realize now looking back that the skills I gained during that time, or like, I guess, like, my skills or my gifts of what I saw at the time to be something that was limiting me were actually the thing that was pushing me toward entrepreneurship. But I think it came from my parents pushing this agenda on me and me being like, "No, this feels like it doesn't fit."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like a common story is that juxtaposition, right? Where it's like you're pushed down a certain path. I think with so much pressure, if you will, that like you can see that that's not for you. Now, for
Mhm.
me personally, that wasn't actually the case. So my father always wanted to be an actor and a singer when he was in India. He ended up marrying my mom and coming to here, and just for whatever reason, that dream didn't work out. But he was always someone who supported me chasing my dreams. So like when I went to college, I ended up getting a corporate job that after 6 months out of college, I quit out of encouragement from him. So I have
Okay.
to say, like, I actually had the support to just pursue whatever I wanted to. And so there were many seasons where I was wandering, I think because I was so supported in doing whatever I
Mm,
wanted. So I was not forced to do anything, which almost like had its own challenges in
for
itself because when
sure.
you're not
For
pushed in
sure.
any direction, you kind of wander. But what I will say is whether it was like a conscious like encouragement or just like the subconscious kind of like things that were spoken in between. My father always wanted me to just pursue my dreams, do what I wanted to. I think because he never got the chance to up until now. He's now in his 60s and he has an album coming out on the 14th of December. So he
Cool.
decided to pursue his dreams after he saw his kids do that, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, and I have to say I'm so grateful for that because I find that most kids are pushed to a certain path, to a certain agenda.
Mhm.
But no, you want to be an athlete, go be an athlete. You want to be an entrepreneur, go be an entrepreneur, you know? And I think where that really was the most touching to me was after I had failed, and when I had failed big. My father still was like, nah, like you're not getting your job, you know? So that was cool. That was really cool.
Mm. And,
Yeah.
like, do you feel like maybe when you were younger, you knew you were just gonna do something big, but you didn't know what it was? Or, like, when you like, you know how when kids are young, they're like, "Oh, I wanna be a teacher, I wanna be a lawyer."
Yeah.
Like, when you were younger, what did you see for yourself? Or was it maybe too open because you're like, "Technically, the world is your oyster, so I could be
Yeah.
anything."
Yeah, fortunately, I fell upon soccer. I was actually really good. I thought I was going to be a professional athlete. You know, I played Division 1 soccer, which is the
Mhm.
highest collegiate level. So I thought I was going to be a professional. So I was pretty narrow minded with that. So you know, like ever since I was 6 years old, I was kind of the same thing for up until I was about 18. Was professional athlete. That was the goal. I think before that it was astronaut, but then once right,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
I love
So
it, I love it. So you end up in soccer,
yeah.
and what happens from that point?
So I was pretty good. I was pretty good. I didn't have it here mentally. Like when I reflect back now, I realize I was never going to go pro because I didn't have the right like mindset or mentality. But I was very good. Now this is kind of like a common recurring theme for me is because from such a young age, I always had that thing that I was so laser focused on. In seasons where I don't, I get lost and like I become a liability to myself and everybody around me. So I ended up kind of losing that professional dream. And like for anybody that's like had like an ego death or like lost their identity because it's so wrapped up in a thing, like that's such a common pain that I've observed happens with like high achieving people, high performing people. And
Mhm.
so at the age of 18, I get injured, you know, the whole professional dream doesn't work out. And I get caught up and wrapped up in the wrong things, you know. So young boy, you know, top of the world, my ego is huge because I'm a D1 athlete. And then all of a sudden, you know, I believe I'm nothing, which is obviously not true, but at the time that's what you believe. So ended up getting wrapped up in addiction. And I see this happen to a lot of people where they lose their identity and they just like kind of fall into a world of sin, which was really it was a very painful period for me. But I think out of that is where entrepreneurship was born for me because I ended up cleaning my life up after that point, and you know I get into nootropics, which are brain supplements. So that was kind of like a turning point into entrepreneurship for me. But yeah, that's kind of the story, you know.
Well, like, when you had obviously, you have this vision of being a professional athlete, and to have just life, whatever in whatever circumstance, shift gears for you. When you said, like, obviously your identity, I think that that happens in different flavors in a lot of people's lives. Like, I think for
Yeah,
even, you know, my mom was a single mom of 4, and her vision was like, "Okay, great, we're gonna have this beautiful family, both have great careers," and then she ended up raising us all on her own. It was like this aggressive, like, life pivoted her path
yeah, yeah,
without necessarily her there's nothing she could do about it. It was just like, or for you, like, getting injured, like, it just was the reality at the time.
yeah,
But I think that process is so painful
yeah,
because we talk often, her and I, about the death of the dream, which is that you're so emotionally, mentally invested of like, this is who I'm going to be, this is the life I'm going to have. And so then when something happens, you're grieving this vision that you saw for yourself, or like for you, you're like, I'm going to be an athlete. And it's like to not have that vision and you're like, okay, this dream has to die. How was that period for you to say, okay, like, who is Neal now?
yeah, yeah, for sure. And to that point, like when I talked about the identity, really like losing yourself and that ego death, like you nodded your head, like really
Yeah.
understanding. So it's one of those like painful experiences that unless you go through it, like it's almost impossible to characterize because it is so painful. And that's why, like, right now, my whole mantra is who, not what. Like, it doesn't matter what the vehicle for me is anymore. It matters, like, who I've become in the process and the journey. Because, like, that's the whole thing is like these dreams and these goals could be taken away from us at any moment. Right. And, like, we look at our favorite professional athletes, like, their careers are so fragile. Like, and that's the thing I realized, like, any one dream can be so fragile. You know, I'm in the banking industry right now, for the finance industry. Like, God forbid, like everything tightens up and regulations tighten up and I can't get people business funding, like that could go. But it's like, do I have the lessons of the discipline, of the mental toughness, of the resilience, of the resourcefulness, right? So like back then I was so clueless and I was in so much pain. But I think as I pulled myself out of it, I made this recognition like it doesn't matter what I'm doing, it matters who I'm becoming. And that's where my fascination with transformation of the ego came from. But let me ask you, have you had an experience like that where you've like just completely lost your identity
Oh my God, yeah.
and yeah, so I want to hear about it. Yeah.
Well, okay, so George. And
Yeah.
so I actually, which is it's very recent for me because I until I started coaching with him, didn't realize how literally my entire identity was wrapped up in my business.
Mm,
And what I mean by in the business was like in its financial success.
yeah.
Um and I was so deeply detached from myself. And because I grew up, I have kind of a weird roundabout story, which I'll summarize very quickly. But basically, my parents divorced when I was young. My dad's parents, who were immigrants from Croatia and Germany, they won the lottery of $7 million.
Wow.
And so that created a lot of divide in our family. So for me, I didn't necessarily have a lot of access to those funds, nor did my
Mm,
mom. And so as a result, what it did is it created this thing of like, I saw my mom struggle and really struggle to provide. And she did everything she could, but she was also a single mom before who worked at a bank. And on the contrast, I had this other side of my family who had like abundance of resources. And then here
mhm,
I am smacked up in the middle.
mhm,
So I think for me, I was like, okay, like I don't want, and I'm not going to get attached to their millions. I'm going to go make my own. So it was
mhm,
like head down, get to work and, rewrite this life for my mom who's now 70. And I think because of that, like I just never looked up. I wasn't connected to myself. I didn't think about anything other than like, okay, like just get the money, get the money. And if you're good in that bucket, you'll be good in everything.
mhm,
And I didn't realize that like physically I was not crushing, relationship wise, not doing great. And everything else was just like, can't deal with this. Like this is the North Star. So when I started coaching with George, as you know, he does business strategy, but he breaks your brain
yeah.
typically in other
That's for
areas
sure.
much more, which ultimately dominoes into your business. And so I remember we did an intensive and he kind of, the only way I can explain it is like, obviously it's a series of different exercises he does, but he lifted the veil. And I remember I came home from that intensive and it was like, I have no idea who I am because I realized I am burnt out and I am not motivated for the right reasons. And I am, the dude in my relationship. And I am like all these like boom, 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 all these levels of awareness start to happen. And it was like he broke my brain. He broke my identity in that intensive. And it was like, okay, like, see ya, go home and, let's build this business. And so over the last 2 years, I've been in this really truthfully the same transformation, which is who the hell am I?
Mhm,
And why do I do what I do? And to your point of like, it's not what you achieve, it's about who you are. I truly think, which is crazy to say at 33, I don't even think I even have known who I was until 2 years ago. I
yeah,
was just like a shell of a person living life of what I thought was the right thing to do, say, experience. And it's been very painful because to not feel at home in yourself is a very unsettling feeling. Like to just be
mhm,
by yourself, you can't get validation from other people. You can't get validation from your work anymore. You can't get validation from the dream or the status or the achievement. It's just you. You have to feel really at home in yourself. And I think for me, there was no way like over it, under it, around it. I was like, I have to go through this of like, who the hell am I? And really truthfully rebuilding myself with the new version that released all these other pieces that I thought were me.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fascinating. That is painful.
Yeah.
I think the whole idea of sitting with yourself is so important for like I think everyone needs to be able to do that. And like one of my like barometers to just like see if I'm okay, just as a human being or not, is like, can I sit with myself for 5 minutes without my phone, without anything, and just be okay? Like not even great, not even euphoric, just be okay sitting right there.
Yes.
And if I can't, then I'm not okay. So that's thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really
Yes.
interesting. Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
mentioned during that era, which I also think, I want to hit on, you mentioned that there was an aspect of like addiction, which even as you say that, I think that that shows up for maybe I don't know how it showed up for you, but I think it shows up for people in a variety of different ways. I think that when we hear addiction, there's probably a lot of people who don't realize that addiction can take a lot of different forms when you're
Yeah.
trying to what I would technically coin like self-soothe
Mhm.
this internal battle that's happening
Yeah.
inside of you. So like I definitely experienced that in my own flavor, but for you, what did that look like during that time when you're now at this place where you're like, okay, great, this dream is not going to happen. Now you're left with Neil.
Yep.
And so how do you navigate like just taking a step forward while obviously navigating all these emotions that are coming up through that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is like choosing not to deal with those emotions is like mistake number one. Like that's like the biggest mistake any of us could go through or subject ourselves to. And I think that just the pain and the shame, I think there's a lot of shame. Shame is like probably the number one most negative emotional, spiritual, human experiences that a person could have. Because like with shame is it's not just pure grief. Like there's a lot of like reorientation of stories in your own mind about like what happened. And like I think the reality that I was not good enough to be professional, that was the most painful thing for me to face. And like even up till now, like just up until recently, like I couldn't say those words without feeling so much negative emotion associated with it. Now I can because I realized like that was okay. Because I learned what it was like to become good enough to get to a certain level. And then I also learned what it was like to, okay, I wasn't good enough. Like what was the next level I needed? But I mean, like that, I think that was the truth that I was really trying to run from, that I was not good enough to be a professional soccer player. And that was okay. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think that like that second part, and that was okay, that took me so many years to just really be okay with. Right. And so like it ended up being drugs for me. I ended up telling myself that, okay, I'm a college student. I have to be successful. So I started taking Adderall, but I loved how I felt on it. And I think what was even more important was not just how I loved how I felt, I also loved how I didn't feel, right? I loved how I didn't feel the shame. I loved how I didn't have to really tell myself that story over and over again. And all I did was focus on schoolwork, which really I was just medicating the shame away.
Yeah.
And you wake up 2.5 years later after a seizure, after taking, like 60 pills, a cocktail of pharmaceuticals, you're like, whoa, hold up. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you were about to play a college soccer game and now all of a sudden you're in a hospital. What the hell is going on here?
Mhm.
So that was my wake up. God looked over me, watched over me, and it really cascaded a series of positive events in my life. But I
Mhm.
think that was the turning point when I overdosed. But like talking to that Neil now, it's like I understood why I did what I did, you
For
know?
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and like it's funny you say like addiction shows up in many different forms. Like it could be anything such as just doom scrolling on your cell phone. It could be sugar, like it could be anything that you use to not feel your feelings, right?
Mhm.
So
Well, I think even as you say that, like, think how many of us and the worst part is, which I think is also a factor in it, is like just because something as an addiction is more culturally acceptable doesn't make it less of an addiction.
yeah.
So I think, sometimes when people hear things that are not as culturally talked about or societally talked about, it feels like it's like more of a shock factor when someone says addiction. But to your point of
Mhm.
scrolling, there's this cultural acceptance that at night we spend 2 hours scrolling TikTok. There's like this joke amongst, different generations of like, "Oh yeah, we're just like spending the night scrolling social media before
Yeah.
bed." Well, that still to your point is an addiction. Like I think about how many people watch TV and 10 minutes in are like, "I gotta scroll my phone because I'm not getting that dopamine the way that I need to be."
Right.
Or at night, they have this routine or, like, you're literally going to the washroom and you're scrolling on your phone. Like, you can't
That's
even
crazy.
just go to the washroom without
Yeah.
being on your phone. So, I think it's also an invitation to look at what are things and this was, Kelsey, who we both know. We were talking about this, her and we started to really understand, like, what truly is something that has a grip on us. And it's really anything that you couldn't release tomorrow without feeling it.
Hmm.
Like, and it could be
Hmm.
caffeine, it could be food, it could be social media, it could even be healthy things. Like her and I were talking about, the gym. People also are addicted to working out or addicted to tracking their macros or
Hmm.
addicted, like hyper fixated on things, which is typically I'm going to control here because I can't control over here. So there's not
Hmm.
really this aspect of surrender.
Yeah.
And for me, I know at like the worst point in my business, it was just food. Like I was just
I know.
constantly with my entire thing that I've had to rewire is that when I'm upset, I eat. And so it was like, okay, great. That's not something that's going to serve me. Can
Yeah.
I self-soothe this feeling of unease with something healthy? And then that got me into the high performance era of like ice baths. And I remember when I met George, I was, like, having a stressful week, and I was like, "I have to go ice bath." And he came to this point where he goes, "You realize the ice bath is not actually resetting, that's actually a crutch for you, right?" And
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, "What?" And so I start to realize I'm having baths twice and 3 times a day. This is not a, "Oh, I have an ice bath because I love to start my day this way." This is actually the crutch that's the only thing getting me back to neutral so I can
Yeah.
continue to move forward today versus
Absolutely.
something that's actually helping me to grow.
That's so fu and when he called that out, were you irritated or were you like, "Thank
He
you"? Were
yawned.
you were beyond right?
He yawned.
He has a look
He
at
yawned. Yeah, because
Yeah.
you're seen. I was
Yeah.
pissed because he caught me. That's how I
Yeah.
think about it. It's like,
Yeah.
you see me now, and now I can't hide in this thing
Yeah.
any longer.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the most triggering things is when a person that cares for you, that loves you, like, sees an attachment that you have that doesn't serve you. It actually is very, very triggering. But, like, that's, like, such a good point that you're kinda bringing up is, like, if you could live free from attachments to anything, like, you're ultimately free, and I think that's, like, the whole premise behind medicating, right? That was for me, the premise behind medicating is I had an attachment to who I thought I should be. I was so addicted to that goal and that dream that I couldn't let it go. And because of that, I was compulsively medicating, right? Because the pills turned into to other things as well, right? I was addicted to anything and everything at that point in my life, right? So
Mm.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
And how did you, at that time, when you talk about the aspect of shame, because I think a lot of people have those in different flavors. How did you get to a place where you could make peace with it? Like, I think there's a lot of people who could have had that moment, and when you said that you had, the seizure, who could have very easily minimized, "Oh, it was a one-off, it was an accident." Like, there could have been a lot of ways you could have easily seeped back into old patterns. What did it look like for you to be like, "Okay, like, no, we're not doing this. Like, we're going down a different path."
Yeah, it's so this seems like almost like Hollywood, like very, very cinematic, but like I actually looked in the mirror and I was like, "Bro, who are you? Like you are not them." Right? Some could say that there was like a judgment, but like you are not a drug addict. Like that is not who you are. And when I looked in the mirror and I saw myself, I'm like, "You're an athlete. You're a scholar. You're someone who's curious. Like just everything that we think of when we think of a typical drug addict." Like I was like, that's not me, right? And so
Mhm.
there was almost this recognition of my own identity, and it didn't resonate with anything that addiction stood for, right? And so in that moment where I actually looked in the mirror, which by the way, like I advise anyone where if you feel lost, like do that. Like look yourself in the eyes, in the mirror, and return back home to who you are. And so then I mean it was just step by step, day by day, like the only thing that I focused on was not using drugs that day. That's it. That was it. I didn't focus on getting anything done. I didn't care about accomplishing anything. I didn't care about becoming anything. All my focus was after the seizure was just not using drugs. And I did that just one day at a time. Just go one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. And that turned into 6 months. And in that 6 month period, like I started filling my time with more productive things. But the lesson that I learned from that specific experience was that like anything that we do is just one step at a time, one brick at a time, one day at a time, and that's like the wisdom that followed me from that period. But I think that it was just like, okay, look in the mirror, realize I need a transformation of my identity, and we're going to do this one brick at a time. Because even as a soccer player, like I played from the age of 6 all the way to the age of 18. And I played 5 times, 6 times, almost 7 times a week, some weeks sometimes more, and it was an everyday thing. It was a step by step thing. And so like it's kind of a somber thought, I think, but like we don't get too many things that we get to do in this life. Like if we want to be really, really good, so we have to pick them wisely. And doing drugs was not one of those things that I wanted to be really good at, you know. I wanted to be really good at other things that were way more constructive. So
Well, you also, in that I'm hearing, like, held to your point of it's about who you are. It's not about what you're doing or what you're achieving or accomplishing or what it looks like. I think in
yeah,
that moment, like when you're saying you're looking at yourself in the mirror, there's also this ability to just know what your values are. And I think that for a lot of people, knowing your potential is one thing, but to be like, okay, like what are the values of who I am as a person? To your point, you're like, this
yeah,
is not me. Part of that,
yeah,
I think, also came from the fact that you're like, I know what my values are, like being Neal and having the life that I want is going to fall into these like 5 buckets of like the kind of man I want to be, the kind of person I want to
yeah,
be. And so I feel like that's a huge piece because it's less of, okay, like, what am I going to do? It's more of like, who am I as the question? And then saying, am I showing up in those values today? And that in itself will kind of, turn things in the sense of pathway that you go down. And when you say step by step, that lands so deeply because
Yeah.
one of the things I've struggled with so much in these moments where you become lost is all you want is someone to be like, here's how it's going to all work out. Like,
Well,
here's all of how it's going to work out. And you feel
yeah,
terrified to take that step because you go, oh my God, how is this going to happen? Like, what's it going to look like?
yeah,
That's one path. Or you have the other path, which is someone says, like, oh my God, I'm just overwhelmed. I don't want to take any step because
yeah.
thinking about this different path feels entirely overwhelming. And I remember, the whole motto of like bite by bite was so frustrating because I thought, well, that's nice to say, but like my whole life is on fire and
Yeah,
I need a plan here because for me, the plan was kind of connected to feeling safe. So for you, when you're in this moment, you're like, okay, I'm not obviously living this life anymore. I know that these are not the values that I want to live by. How long before it was bite by bite did you kind of start to see the vision of, okay, actually, this is where I think I want to go?
that's such a cool question. And so like just like kind of going to the point of like values, right? Like the first value for me is extreme ownership, right? I am responsible for anything and everything that happens to me at all times, always. I said that to myself a million times a day. Maybe that's exaggerating, but a lot of times a day, right? And so then, like, when I recognize, okay, like I'm putting this pill in my mouth, so I'm also responsible for taking a step into my car, even when it's cold, or driving to the gym, right? So, during the time when I got clean, I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I ended up just really, really going to the gym. And it was something that I loved doing and ended up becoming a bodybuilder during that period. Right. So, like it, I think when did I start to feel better? Like a few weeks into a few months into it. Right. And I think the beautiful part about being a white belt, the beautiful part about being a rookie, like the beautiful part about just being a bodybuilder without having any ego attached to it, right? Because when I was a soccer player, I was Division 1, I was this, I was that, right? Being a bodybuilder, it was brand new. Like fitness was brand new for me, at least in that form. And so I was able to become whoever I wanted to. And I mean, I think within a year, like my whole entire body changed. I gained 90 pounds. I, you know, I became a different person. I saw myself as a different person. I felt like I was a different person. And then 90 pounds later, you're big, right?
Mm.
And so I genuinely physically felt like a different person. So like that's like my advice to anyone who like wants to actually make a change in their identity is like literally physically change yourself. Like if you can physically become a different person, like you could change your entire identity, you could change your entire story. But I would say it took about a year for me to see myself as just a totally different person than the addict for sure.
Well, the interesting part about that I see is that you took the action and you took the step by step or the bite by bite, and then the identity came. Whereas I think for a lot of business owners or a lot of people in general, they're like, I want to feel the identity as a download, and then I'm going to go.
Yeah,
So you know, if you're even like, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, it's like you don't become an entrepreneur because you think about becoming an entrepreneur and then eventually you start taking action on it. Most people become an entrepreneur because they have this like scrappy, to your point, they are the underdog. And so they're literally just doing anything they can. And over time they go, oh my God, I'm building a business. It's not
yeah,
that they, ruminate of like, I'm a business owner, I'm a business owner. There's a piece there, which for you was like you literally started taking movements in motion and before you knew it, you look up and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm a different person." But I think
yeah,
some people get it the other way, which is that they're like, "Okay, how like you could have easily sat and manifested future Neal
yeah.
and not done anything about it." So I'm curious for you, like, do you feel like the how did the identity to action kinda correlation there work for you? Because obviously
That's
previous to that, you had a big identity paired with action, and now you're in action to create an identity, if that makes sense.
no, it makes total sense. And if I may ask a question to you, so like what is your next version in terms of your identity?
It's a great question. Um I would say, like, off the top of my head, without judging myself, the only thing I think of as, like, a new version would be being in flow,
Mm,
a lot more. I think I've been living deep in my masculine for a very, very long time, and so I think being more in flow releasing the need to have all the plans and all of the steps of how it's going to work out and push, 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 and it constantly being more and more and more. And I think for me, it is a very difficult thing to flex because I realized that I have a lot of like trauma and upbringing that was all centered around like control and
Mhm,
me in the driver's seat. And I think in this next season, I'm trying to figure out how to lean into a life of surrender,
mhm.
which thus far has proved to be very
Difficult,
difficult.
huh? Yeah, yeah. No, really, really cool, really cool. No, and I just asked that out of curiosity because I definitely don't have all the answers. That's for sure. I think during that period, what was so beautiful is like I actually didn't really have any goals, right? I didn't really have any tangible goals. I think the only goal that I had was to find a goal that was worthwhile, right? That was kind of like my next
Mm,
step, right? But because I was not like married or attached to any one outcome, I just said, what is my inclination? It wasn't even a passion. It was just like, what is my inclination that I could cultivate? And then I just did what I felt like doing that was the right thing, that I knew was the right thing, right? Because I had such a powerful rubric for what the wrong thing was at that time that like now I was like, just do the opposite, which is to not take drugs, right? And going to the
right.
gym, that felt like the right thing. Meditating, I meditated a lot. I meditated like an hour a day for 7 years.
Wow.
And, and actually when I lost that practice was when a lot of things in my life started to go downhill as well. But yeah, I mean, there was no identity that I was really attached to in the first place. And so I just took the actions that felt right. I think sometimes when there's an agenda, we can limit ourselves for what we think is possible. But when we don't have an agenda, we just allow ourselves to be who we truly are, is when there's no need to be working towards anything specifically because we are who we're meant to be. So if we
Right.
want to talk about the ultimate flow state, like that was a period where I had the ultimate flow state, you know? So, I mean, what comes first, the identity or the action? I think the action. I think the action. I have to say that. That's what life has proven to me, but perhaps someone has a different model.
Yeah, I think I agree because I think that nothing, when reflected on it, nothing in my life that has ever been an accomplishment or that ended up being something that brought me fulfillment came from me having a plan for it first.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
every single thing that was such a blessing, I was like, I could have never seen that coming. Had
Yeah.
no idea that I'd be an entrepreneur, had no idea that I would have this business, had no idea that I would, leave an engagement. Like none of that was on the vision board per se. But it was something that obviously landed me here. And so it made me realize that like the desire for control is just this, or the desire to kind of be like, okay, this is the vision, this is who I'm going to become, and having this crystal clear of what that's going to look like. It's just this perception of that's what would make me feel safe. But the reality is, to your point, you were like, you're tuning in and you were intuitive with yourself, which I think, to your point of meditation, is something that a lot of people don't do. Like when you were saying you're doing an hour a day, and when you stopped doing that, there was this kind of cause and effect that happened.
Yeah.
I attribute that to be, when I hear that I think that we hear ourselves when we create enough space to actually listen.
Yeah.
And many times when people don't listen inward, they go outward to listen. So it's
Mhm.
like, hey, dad, mom, what should I do? Hey, friends, what should I do? Hey, business mentor, what should I do? And so you have a lot of external stimuli in this pursuit to find, okay, like, what's my truth? What's my truth? When really, if you turned off TikTok and your phone and you just sat with yourself, you get this, for me at least, this rushing clarity of it's all right there. And one of the things that even for me, I've been taught in therapy, she's like, Kate, we're not doing more sessions. We don't need to talk about this. You need to sit with yourself. But
Mm,
to your point
mm.
of that being a practice, that's something that a lot of people can't do. Like a lot of people cannot
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I'm really happy for you that like that's a realization for you because like anybody that knows you knows you're like
Mhm.
super high power in the best way. Like you have the answers, right? And it's like the question that I ask myself is like, why do I believe that this person knows more than I do about where I should be going, right? And anytime I like don't trust myself, it's not that I have a problem trusting others, but it's that anytime I don't trust myself, or at least don't ask myself the right questions, is when I end up getting lost, right? And so that was the thing about meditation was that it gave me a space to figure out who I truly was. It gave me a space to figure out, okay, what did I actually stand for? And it gave me a space to figure out what I don't stand for, right? And I think just the art of thinking in itself is a lost art, right? Like if you ever give yourself just an hour to think, Like not like passively think, but like say, okay, like I have this problem that I want to think about the solution to, right? Like that's also something that in that phase I gave myself a lot of space to do. And lately, right now, because I've been struggling with an identity shift right now, I've been saying, okay, just give yourself a little bit of space to think about it and give yourself a little bit of space to let those answers come to you. So yeah, I mean, like I think you're right. Like most people don't know how to sit with themselves. And our society is becoming tougher and tougher with so many more distractions and just
Mhm.
things flying at you is so normalized, it's almost scary, you know?
Well, I think that question is so powerful, which is why do I think that this person has the answers for me? And that's something I think that everyone should sit with because even for myself, I got called out because I was doing the exact same thing, which was that I was like, okay, like, hey, mom, what do you think about this? And to my sister, what do you think about this? And hey, George, what do you think about this? And literally having multiple people who are very deep into personal development as well, who just said, I think you need to ask yourself this and just
Yeah,
tune out. Like, stop talking to people about this because
right.
it's just giving you more confusion when you sit alone with the data. You've added 60 other data points to your sorting where you actually had six if you hadn't asked all those people.
Yeah.
And for me, I realized I'm like creating my own misery basically with
Mhm.
asking constantly for other people as to like, what's my vision? What's my vision? Instead of realizing that that question in itself is the invitation to your point to go inward. And
Absolutely.
so for you, you take this space and you start taking the bite by bite. You start taking the action by action. And obviously, the end of the year, you're like, okay, you're into the bodybuilding community now. You're starting to feel like you're seeing this identity shift. When you're at this place, how do we go from here into getting into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for sure, and so, like, I think when I saw myself transform so quickly, I got fascinated by this idea of transformation. And so I like asked myself, like, where does it actually start from? I think part of it was me wanting to take a different angle. I think part of it was me just wanting to create something of my own. But ultimately, how did I actually get into entrepreneurship? I was working at Johnson and Johnson in their pharmaceuticals department, and I didn't like it, so I quit. I had a friend; he worked for ADP, which they did payroll. He called me one day. He said, "Hey Neil, I know in college you talked about being an entrepreneur in your 30s, right? Do you want to like fast forward that 10 years?" I'm like, why? Why do you say that? Well, because for me to get my year-end bonus, I need to get one more company on payroll, right? I'm like, okay, cool. So he's like, I'll pay for your LLC, I'll pay for your state fees and all that, and then you could be an entrepreneur. How does that sound? And I'm like, okay, sounds good. So I had an LLC. And so my girlfriend and I at the time were like, well, we have a business, so we might as well go do something with it. So that's like the actual story of how it happened.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I was in the gym and I loved supplements. You know, I took supplements, I would sell supplements. So I kind of got into the supplement industry that way. I had an LLC. And so my plan was let me create an online store, generate enough revenue reselling other people's supplements, and then take the money and start my own supplement brand. Now, at the time, there was a company called Amazon. I don't know if you've heard of them or not. And I realized that online store was probably not a good idea. It took me about a year to realize that. But that was kind of what the original plan was. That didn't work out. So I ended up taking a loan and I started a supplement company that ended up really taking off after some time. So that was kind of the story there is it all kind of landed by accident, which is really interesting to your point. Because when I think about all the beautiful things that have ever come into my life, like they've all been accidents, right? Where like I'm expectant of something beautiful to come to me. Like even right now, I'm in a position where I expect something great to come to me, but I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is, but that's the story.
It's so funny because I feel like everyone has like interesting entrepreneur stories in the sense of like how they fell into the thing that they're creating. And interestingly enough, most people were never like you weren't 18 being like, I'm going to be a supplement giant in this
No.
space, right? Like this was not something that was like a predetermined vision. And I think that that's really important for people. And even for me, it was the same thing. I kind of fell into entrepreneurship
Yeah.
because I think it also releases kind of back to your earlier point of like the vision and constantly knowing exactly where we're going. Entrepreneurship, I think, is probably one of the biggest testaments to bite by bite because there's literally no roadmap. Like, even if we think about in this moment in time, AI and things that are changing with online marketing and all of these pieces, there's no roadmap as to exactly what AI is going to look like for all of us in business in the next
Hmm.
15 years. So to think
Yeah.
about, okay, well, like, here's all the things I'm going to do. For you, you were like, hey, I've got this LLC. I wonder what I could do with this. Like,
Yeah.
there was also this undertone I feel like I'm hearing of in your journey, curiosity. Like, there was this kind of constant seeking to get curious about what was next.
So it's this beautiful observation, by the way. I think that there's a few experiences in the human, just in the human experience, that are such a blessing, that are so beautiful. I think falling in love. I think experiencing beauty. I think curiosity is one of those experiences, right? Where like you just ask questions and you just figure stuff out. And like I know you know this all too well as an entrepreneur who's gotten as far as you've gotten. There have been problems that you've solved, and the only reason you solved them is because you just stuck with them from a place of persistence and curiosity, right? And you just like say like, how do I do this? All right, I get it wrong. I get it wrong. I get it wrong. I get it wrong until I get it right. And so like that was definitely a prevailing experience for me. And even now, like if I ever get down on myself, like that's a place that I go to is like, what problems can I solve? Right. Cause then I'm just like, this whole thing is just a game, right? This whole entrepreneurship thing is actually just
Yeah.
a big game. And yeah, like I really didn't take it that seriously back then, and I find even now, like when I take myself too seriously, when I take entrepreneurship too seriously, is when I get
Things go
stuck,
wrong.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, you know this all too well, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you're having fun, when you're playing the game, it's things move because you're just playing a game,
And it's,
you
I
know?
think also, not to get woo woo about it, but I think it's also like a frequency thing. People really underestimate, like, to your point of just like the joys in life, your business, like, it obviously, I always tell people it's hard work, but it's not complicated.
Yeah,
So, like, I think, just like anything, if you go to the gym, it's hard. There's a lot of days you don't feel like working out, but there should be this enjoyment of the fact that you can move your body, this enjoyment of like the pursuit of like, okay, well, yesterday I lifted 30 pounds. Today I'm going to try for the 40s. It's like there should be this kind of curiosity paired with fun or excitement in the pursuit of that.
yeah,
And I want to, I guess, unpack because obviously most people in business have this initially pursuit of something I might say superficial, which
hmm,
is this number. A lot of the people that I talk to in business are say, okay, well, I want to hit seven figures, or I want to hit multiple seven, or I want to hit an eight-figure business. And so you build this supplement business, and obviously it's wildly successful. So in the mention of identity, because every single person listening is probably thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, I could only imagine being able to generate something that big, or I could only imagine being able to be behind something so successful. So to even be able for most people to hear from someone like yourself who's reached that and the truth of, what it took, but also the truth of how it felt when you got there, because you are someone who's very self-aware. What did that look like? Because I have a sneaking suspicion it's not
yeah,
going to be what everybody might think it feels like or what they
yeah.
think it might look like.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so here's kind of the first like rule of winning that took me about 2 years to figure out. Okay, is that when you're winning, it does not feel like you're winning. Oh my lord, every day is hard. Like when I hit a million in revenue, top line revenue, was when every day became hard. That was when every day became hard, right? When I hit three, okay, that was where every day became excruciating, right? And you know, I think that was one of the things about winning that took me so long to come to grips with was that it's not going to feel like this joyful experience in any way, shape, or form. It's problem after problem after problem after problem after problem after problem after problem that you're solving all day, every day.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel good at all. I think now going into this next venture, I'm aware of that. And all of the lessons I had learned from back then, I realized. I think the other thing was like, you have no idea what you're doing basically ever at any phase of entrepreneurship. Like there are people that can help you, coaches, mentors, like that's great. And it's absolutely necessary to get them. But in your specific individual situation, there is no roadmap for you out with your current conditions, with your current resources, with your current chessboard. And so I think for me, one of the hardest things was year one, nothing. Year two, nothing. Year three, a little something, but really not too much. It took me about 4 years to get any type of real traction with my business. And I was working full time as a personal trainer for those four years. And it was just patience and persistence and keep going. And I don't know, for me, I believe that it takes at least 5 years for you to really know at all what you're doing as an entrepreneur. Like it takes a lot of time. And so, yeah, it was not an overnight success. It took me
That's so
7 years,
refreshing for most
you
people
know?
right now who
Yeah.
see, "Hey, become like a multimillionaire in 90 days," kind of thing with, online marketing, and I think that it's really refreshing for someone to hear because I think what ends up happening when people see quote unquote overnight success is that we think something's wrong with us if
Yeah.
you are someone who sees that and you think that hasn't happened for me.
Yeah.
And you think, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my business? What's wrong with my strategy? What's wrong with my work ethic? And to your point earlier about shame, we shame ourselves that we're like, something is wrong. And I think to hear you say, like, it was about persistence and patience and that the momentum started 4 years later. A question I have around that is like, how, like, your mindset in that waiting period, like, in that kind of, obviously, you're not sitting idle waiting for this, success to fall upon you. You're still working. But I guess, how did you hold what's possible when you feel like you maybe aren't seeing that evidence of momentum? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they don't see in year one or year two, okay, wow, we're really blowing up, they think this is not going to work. This is not, clearly I'm not making the moves that I need to be making. Should
Yeah.
I throw in the towel?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. It's a really cool question. I'll say two things. Just number one is when you're meditating an hour a day, you are so present in everything that you're doing that I almost didn't care about the outcome, which sounded so crazy. But the only time I started to care about outcomes was when I actually started to get outcomes, right? So, like, I was more afraid of losing the million than I was of making the next million, right? Like, and that was the thing. But when I didn't have any success, right, or any tangible material success, I didn't care. I just did what I was supposed to do, which was go to the gym, train my clients, work on my business, right? Whatever that looked like, make some content, put up a blog post, learn how to run ads, any of that. When I didn't have any tangible material success, I didn't know what it felt like. So I didn't even have a reference point, right? And then just one day I wrote a landing page and ran some ads and it was like $300 in 1 hour. What's going on? Is this legal?
Something's broken. Something's
Yeah,
broken.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like the thing too, is like it's really not about getting lucky. It's just about trying enough times till you run out of unluck, right? That was like the thing that I realized after that. So I think for anybody that's like getting down on themselves, like if you could somehow detach yourself from the outcome and just fall so in love with what you're doing in the present and just like understand that you don't have to do anything. You get to do it, right? And you just come from that perspective of you get to build this thing and you're not racing with anybody. You're certainly not racing with yourself. You're not running out of time. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like it's okay. And the skills that you're learning from not being able to do it so easily now are going to translate. And I'll say this not as a brag, but as kind of a testament. It took me 7 years to build that first company. I have a new company that in 6 months is on a seven-figure run rate, right? It took me 6 months. And I took the same playbook and I applied it to a different business and I'm able to build it that quickly. So whoever you become is something that will stick with you forever, right? I did not lose that. That's who I am. I could build a business at any time now. And so that's enough inspiration for me to go through whatever grind I'm going through now because I've seen it
Mm.
at work before, you know?
There's so much
So
in that because I think even too, when you experience, for me at least, when I experience
yeah,
these things where I'm like, there's no way I know how to solve this. There's no way I'm gonna be able to overcome this.
yeah,
And then seeing what at the time felt like I was facing Everest in front of me. And
yeah,
now that would look so small by comparison
yeah,
to a problem today. I
right.
think what it does is it builds these reps of mental toughness. And I think that you hit on something that's so important, which is I often talk about the fact that growing and scaling a business, people often say, like, I want to have a seven figure or multiple seven figure, an eight-figure business. And there is, to your point earlier, I think this perception that when I achieve X, I don't have any problems. I'm sitting on a beach drinking a margarita and I don't like seven figures, less problems. Multiple seven figures, I delegated this, I have a system for that. And
Yeah,
I'm like, it's actually not the case. The problems that you experience at a six figure a year business to a seven, to a multiple seven, to an eight, there's problems in all of them. I think that the
absolutely.
difference is perception or
Yeah.
perspective. Because
Right.
I think before, when I was, say like a six-figure business, one problem would rock my day, and it
Rock your
would be
whole
like, "Oh
day.
my,
Yeah.
I'm spiraling for like 3
Yeah.
days on this
Yeah.
tiny little thing," which now I'm like, "Okay, 30 seconds, deal with that, boom, next, what's going on?" Right?
Yeah.
So, I think the problems, I literally think about them like working out, they are literally reps of strength, and you
Yeah.
can't build the strength to lift the heavy weight, which really is the big business,
Yeah.
without working your way up to that weight that you want to be able to carry the load of. And so I
Yeah.
think some people want to skip ahead, as in like, I want to, build a seven or a multiple seven-figure business, or they want to have an eight-figure business. But there's this, well, I have all these problems. The biggest experience shift of how I experienced, to your point, or the process of my business that changed, was that I don't see problems as this big, overwhelming thing.
Mhm.
It's the emotion to it is not nearly as deep as it was before.
Um,
And I think that the perspective is, if I don't have problems, I'm worried, because it
yeah.
means that lack of problems or lack of resistance means, literally, if you think about it like a car, you're not moving. So there's no resistance because you're not making any momentum. So I
Yeah.
almost now look at, again, you want to be conscious of what problems you have, but generally speaking, if you have problems, it's also this picture that you are in fact, in some capacity, moving the needle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, you play the game to play the game. You don't get into the game to not play the game. Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, that's actually a beautiful perspective. I'm taking that with me is this is good. These problems are good. I get to have problems. Right. I'm in the game to play the game. And I don't know if you found this to be true, but like I've found like there have been two really like tough just like revenue numbers is like 0 to 10K a month is a really tough place to be. I think that's the toughest because like you have no idea what you're doing. You don't know anything about anything. Like it's just to get that initial activation energy, that initial momentum, I think is one of the hardest. And then I think like when you have anywhere from like 8 to 12 people reporting to you, that can become very difficult too. The first time you become a leader, that could become very difficult, where you have to go from just self-leadership to like leading other people. So I've found that those are the two experiences that have been the toughest for me.
I
But
completely agree. I
yeah,
completely agree. Because I
yeah,
think at the beginning, you have no evidence to say that you should trust yourself.
yeah,
So when something in the pursuit of getting to 10K a month, or anywhere around that, you have no proof of concept.
yeah,
So it's not like I'm taking this risk and, like, last time I took a risk, it worked out for me. There's no evidence to say that anything that you're gonna do is going to work. So
yeah,
you have to be really comfortable with failure to be able to do literally anything, because otherwise you're paralyzed by, what if this happens? What if that happens?
yeah,
I think when you then fast forward and you're deeper in business, I think the reason that people that have bigger businesses make decisions quicker, and people go, "Oh my gosh, like, how did you just decide? Yeah, we'll spend 50K on that. Yeah, sign that 100K contract."
yeah,
People are like,
yeah,
"Pardon? Like, you took 20 minutes to think about that." The reason is because I think you just, over time, again, to reps, like, you build up so much evidence inside of you that the process or the filtering that you have to go through, it becomes shorter, shorter, shorter. And as a result, you develop this, like, perfect speed at which you
yeah,
can integrate. But I agree, because even with a lot of clients that I help, going to seven figures, you can go to figures pretty much on your own, in the sense of like
yeah,
using your own skill sets, leading, to your point, yourself as the main thing. There is this big issue with people wanting to go from seven to multiple seven a year, because, to your point of leadership, I don't think people understand that at a certain point, when you want to have a multiple seven-figure business, you're not in the business of you anymore. You're in the business of other
mm,
people. And
yep,
so when someone's like, "Well, I don't want to deal with these people, and I don't want to manage people, and I don't want to lead people," that is your job if you
yep.
decide that you want to build a business that big. And so I 100% agree. And I'm curious for you, like, what did that threshold look like to be able to break through that for you?
Yeah, so it was okay. It was a lot less painful for me than I think for a lot of other people. And the reason I say that is because I genuinely, truly love people. I love people. I think it's almost cool to say that like, oh, I hate people or I don't love people. I almost feel like people sometimes wear that as a badge of honor, but like
Mm.
I love people. And so a skill that I didn't even know was a skill was that like I just loved talking to people. So as I hired people on my team, I just asked them how they were doing. And that was so weird to them because they never had a boss that ever asked them how they're doing, which was weird to me because I just care.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what do you mean you don't care? Like you have to, how can you not care? You know?
Mhm.
So that leadership is and was a lot of fun for me. Now there comes a certain point where you could also get very frustrated and you could also get very resentful because people don't do things the way that you do. But like the way that you could get people to do things, not just the way you do, but even better than the way you do, is like find out what makes them tick. Right. Now, at first, this came naturally to me. I think the leadership side of it came natural to me. Where I struggle was the management, right? And so it was even just identifying the difference between the two, where as I called leadership like, okay, how do I get a person motivated, inspired, intrinsically driven as opposed to extrinsically driven, right? That's what I consider leadership. And then management was like the organization of tasks to get a project done. The latter, I was horrible at. But I think that even just recognizing what the difference between the two was really important for me as well. So, I mean, I think like anybody just like watching this could ask themselves, like, when it comes to people and hiring, like, are you good at leading them? Are you good at inspiring them? Are you good at managing them? Where do you fall short? Having the self-awareness and then working on that specific thing. And the one thing that I love about business in general is that it's such a fair audit of how you're showing up as a human being. So if you're not leading yourself,
Yeah.
somewhere in your business that's going to show up, right? If you're not being compassionate to yourself, somewhere in your business that's going to show up.
Mhm.
So, I always remember like if something's not going well in my business, something's not going well with Neil. Like that's just how it
Mhm.
goes, you
Mhm.
know?
I think a lot of people think they're distinct and that they're separate,
Yeah.
as in like, okay, like I have my personal life. I have like, I know that that's on fire, but I'm going to park that and I'm going to go thrive in my business. And
Yeah.
I do think that there's a lot more tie than we think. And I love the accentuation on team because even when I train people's teams and we're working with them, I'll say, so, like Steve, what's Steve motivated by? And they're like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you don't know? Like, is it
Yeah.
financial security? Is it the fact that they love words of affirmation? Like one team member could be really motivated by increasing their salary. And then I've had other people who are like, I don't care about that at all. I just want to know, like, am I doing a good job? Like, how am I growing my
Mm,
role? Like, can I get better results for you? Like, one person's very much about, like, are we thriving in the results and the outcome? Someone else might be like, well, if I hit this number, that for me is like, I'm good. I'm like beyond
yeah.
committed to the vision, right?
Yeah.
So I think that not knowing what people's motivators are really ultimately means that you're trying to say their motivator is blue, but you're working in the operation of purple. No wonder there's like a misalignment, right?
Yeah.
And so it was even for me, I remember having interpersonal conversations with people about like, okay, like how are things at home? Like, how are things going? Are you sleeping? And, someone was experiencing something stressful. I said, do you need a week off? Like, and they're like, this is weird that
Yeah.
you care about me as a
Right?
person. But the thing is, if you don't like the people that are doing the work are still people living their lives. So the way that
Yeah.
I see it is like, yes, they have a role, there's a position, but if the person, it's like the hierarchy of needs. If the person is not poured into, they're not going to perform for you in whatever it is that you're looking for them to do. So the
Yeah.
more that you pour into them as the person, the more they thrive in the position of whatever it is they're doing. And they feel seen, which I think in a lot of companies is not an experience that most people have.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the
Yeah.
first questions that I ask anybody that I bring into my company is like 5 years from now, like, where do you wanna be? And how can we help you get there, right? Like, and that's the deal. I said, "I'm gonna make you a deal," right? Is I'm gonna like, as long as you make this a priority and as long as you do your very best, okay, I'm gonna do my very best to help you get to wherever you have to get to in 5 years, right? And we don't have to sit here and act like you wanna work at Integrity First for the rest of your life. Maybe you do, and you're more than welcome to if you perform, but we don't have to pretend that. Like, I just want to know where you want to be and how this role is going to fit into us getting closer to that. And I think that like the tighter you hold on to sand, the faster it falls away, right? Where it's like if you try to hold on to employees and force them to become something that they're not meant to become, that's when like really the problems arise. But when you say, look, like I'm invested in you, like you are more important to me than any agenda that I have for you, right? Like people really can feel that, and when you're sincere about it, it really does help. Really does help.
And so obviously with team, you
Yeah.
have this supplement business and, that's growing and it has great success. How do we get from the supplement business to the funding business that you have and the
Yeah,
financial business you have today?
for sure, for sure. So it's it's a story of success and it's a story of failure. So I ended up really needing a lot of external capital to help the company grow because for inventory purchases and all that. End up hiring a CFO who I personally didn't train properly at all. It was the first time I was ever hiring a partner. I was hiring quickly. No, he really didn't know how to raise money, whether it was debt financing or through investors. So we ended up taking a loan from it's called a merchant cash advance, an MCA. This is predatory financing, basically.
And just for
And
anybody who, because I remember saying this to somebody that was a really interesting part of your story, and they said, what is predatory financing? If someone's thinking, what does that mean?
yeah, it's basically it was interesting. When I had filed bankruptcy for the company, the lawyers were like, "Oh, you got into loan shark loans." So essentially, it's a loan that is meant for you to default, or a loan that puts you into such a tough spot that you're doing anything and everything to pay it back. 40% interest rate, for example, right? So if you borrowed 100,000, you have to pay back 140,000 within 6 months or within 9 months, right? Just these like daily or weekly payments that they squeeze the cash flow out of your business. So, there was a certain point towards the end where just waking up in the morning, I owed $2,000. So even though the business was doing over 300,000 a month in revenue, like just for waking up and brushing my teeth, I owed $2,000. $60,000 a month just taken away just for existing. So I was so squeezed. There was just so much pressure every day that, I could I have saved the business? I don't know. I think my spirit was also pretty crushed. So yeah, I mean, I took my story of addiction and created a brain supplement because I wanted to create a safe alternative to Adderall. I took my experience of predatory financing and losing a business and what I had built, and I said, I don't want other entrepreneurs to deal with that. So now what we do is we help founders get low interest capital. It is a very strategic approach. I've raised a lot of money for myself. And so I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what not to do. And so it's just really a mission that was born from a failure, to scratch my
Mm,
own itch. So
mm.
that's really the story, that's
It's
how
so
it happened.
interesting. It really does all tie to our point earlier of you can't see the vision of how it all comes together. It
Yeah,
really all does. Like your whole story now kind of comes to a point where it all makes sense in the sense of like all the experiences you had, all the insights you had, all the lessons that you learned are like this incredible toolbox that you have today to be able
yeah,
to lean on in this business, to take all those insights and to be able to apply them. I think
absolutely.
people hearing that story, there's so much to unpack, but I guess one of the curiosities that I have just like selfishly is like knowing what you know now. And I'm thinking of the person who's listening who, is inspired, but I'm sure also feels very seen because I think a lot of people don't talk about the hard parts of business. There's a lot of highlight reel available anywhere you want to view
Yeah,
it, but I think, to have someone say, "Hey, like this is something that we achieved, comma, and here's what it also kind of looked like." If you could go back and tell, Neal who was growing that business and you're starting to see momentum at year 4 and, you start to take on this financing, what would you want to tell him or what do you wish you could tell him in that phase?
oh, what a cool question. What a cool question. I'm going to ask that question back to you too, because
Okay.
I think there's so much wisdom in in
Yeah.
in in hearing the answer to that. But it kind of all happened perfectly because I'm happy where I'm at right now. But like the advice that I would give him is slow down. Okay, that's the first thing. I think the other thing is that I needed to learn how to fire, right? Truly, to be fair, is hire slowly, fire quickly. That was definitely some advice that I really needed. I really like to give people a lot of chances, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad quality. But at the time, that one mistake was pretty pivotal, and that was not something that I should have accepted or allowed because it put everybody at risk, and ultimately the business ended up failing because I had the wrong people in the wrong seats. 100% my responsibility, 100% my fault. I have nobody else to blame, but I needed to learn how to fire. I also needed to learn how to just put people in the right places as opposed to try and force people into boxes, because I think that was something else that I did was I tried to force people to be in certain boxes just so they could continue to be a part of the vision. And that didn't serve me. That didn't serve the other person. So I think that's the biggest thing. I know that if I didn't have certain people in certain spots, that I would be able to scale. And I realized that I kept hitting certain inflection points where I couldn't keep pushing beyond because the wrong people were in the wrong seats, right? So that's the advice that I would give myself is don't try and force anyone to be in any positions that they're not meant to be. Trust your gut and slow down. Just slow down just a little bit. Think before you act.
Yeah, I resonate with the slow down one for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
What about you? That in your,
yeah,
especially in the last 2 years, like going
yeah.
back 2 years, what would you advise yourself?
I mean, definitely the slowing down piece I think is huge. I think there's this also duality I've realized of like, there's a lot of people not willing to do the hard work, but also in scaling, hard work doesn't always fix everything.
That's
So
yeah,
there's this kind of like, it's not a black or white, which is why it's always tough for me to describe. But I think there's a lot of people that are frustrated by the fact they can't scale, but I recognize like there is just a level of work ethic that you just can't deny. It doesn't matter who you are or what size you are. Like to your point, if there's always problems, there's always work to be done and the work doesn't go away. But I think that there was a phase where I was just burning the candle at both ends and I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I would work till 1 a.m. and I would just like push, 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 push. But truthfully, I was trying to outwork something to your point that was just like a broken model. And I
mhm,
think that it only survived because I was holding it all up physically myself.
mhm,
Whereas I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is like stepping back in your business shows you where your business is really at. And like if your business truly relies on you to function every single day, you will know
mhm,
it when you take a week off.
absolutely.
And so I think, scheduling in like, once a quarter to try to be less in the weeds of the day to day, I think is a really great way to kind of pressure test your business. And that was a
Yeah,
great insight that I learned. But I think to the model piece, something that kind of was actually the start of the last 2 years was that I had a lot of success, but I had a lot of success building someone else's vision. I had,
mm, wow,
coaching that it's even hard for me in coaching businesses because I know myself on the client side,
yeah,
and it literally stems back to what you said earlier, which is like, who's to say that this person has the answers for me?
yeah,
I was in, and it's not anything to the coach. It's as to your point earlier, like it's 100%. I take full ownership for everything, so it's nothing to do
yeah,
with the coach or the program or any of that. But I had been in coaching and I was so desperately like someone tell me the path to success because like
right,
I again have this background of family stuff that I didn't realize again lack of self-awareness was even my motivator
yeah,
until very recently. So I'm like I have to make this multi-million dollar business like this has to happen just tell me how to do it. And so, one of the first things that we're taught is like learn from those who've done it before you.
right,
But I think that the distinction that I didn't have at the time, which I'm very conscious of now is that I learn what the principle was. I don't learn the specific process of how they did it. And I think
yeah,
I was so latched on to the process of what it had to look like
yeah,
versus what's the big value to your point earlier with values. Like what was the big value that I need to take away from this as a business owner that I can put in
right,
my toolbox and see when I want to use it, how I want to use it, does it feel like it's the right tool for me at this moment? And I think I just saw so many people that had the success that I wanted. And so I thought, okay, great. Screw my ideas, screw my vision, screw how it feels,
yeah,
screw whatever. I'm not going to focus on anything me. They
right,
know they've achieved it. I'm going to park my thoughts, feelings, experiences to the side, and I'm just going to absorb this. And that's
yeah,
going to be the way that I hit success. And then I met George actually at a conference and we started talking about business. And he asked me a very simple question. And he just said, what would it look like if you did business your way? And I remember in that moment, I instantly started crying, which is a
yeah,
very, dramatic react he was like, "Whoa," like, didn't
right,
realize what I hit on there kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
He was not prepared for that. And so he was like, "Okay, there's something there clearly." But it triggered me because I think I knew on, like, a deep level that I was building someone else's vision, and I think the hardest part of all of that is that it was successful. So
yeah,
it's not even like I'm building someone else's and I'm, miserable and I'm not getting what I
yeah,
want. Like the business was doing very, very well.
right,
And I really had to completely audit the entire thing front to back to say, okay, what of this is not actually mine?
yeah,
And, to your piece of team, like there was ways in managing, this aspect of don't get personal with your team members, like don't talk about personal matters. Like you don't want to mix business and life and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so in the last 2 years, it's literally been, what offers do I like and what schedule do I want to have? And like,
Yeah.
does this decision I'm looking to make support that or not? Or, even with team, I've become way closer with my team in the last, 2 years
Yeah.
than I ever had before that. Because before it was just like business outcomes, to-do lists. And now I'm like, hey, like, how's your son? And like, how are you feeling about X? And those are
Yeah.
questions that I just don't think I felt permission, I think is what it comes down to. I gave myself permission instead of seeking that from other people, to your point earlier.
That's so crazy. Like that's so crazy for me to hear because like when I heard you speak in Montana, like there was a sense of originality to what
Mhm.
you were sharing. Like obviously it was a culmination of all the lessons that you've learned from others, but also like your own experience of testing and trying things and thinking for yourself in this presentation that was, just a small representation of your
Yeah.
originality and your own genius. And so to hear that for so long that you didn't allow yourself to see that, and then like it's so beautiful that you finally did, and now you're at a point where you're sharing that with people is
Mhm.
it's crazy for me to hear. It's beautiful for me to hear. I have to say congratulations, and whatever that factor is of like leaning into yourself, I would encourage you to keep doing. Um,
Literally stillness.
there you go. There you go. I think we all have to meditate now or
I
day.
yeah. I I was so deep in my masculine, and I went to Montana for my intensive, and we went in like a side by side up a mountain. I remember going to the top of this mountain, it was just complete silence. Like we're not talking, there's no birds, there's no anything. You're so high up that there's just air. Like it was just like the energy got sucked out of the room and you couldn't hear anything. And it was overwhelming coming from like a Toronto area where you've got like alarms going off and dogs barking and all of this constant stimuli. And I remember someone saying, like, you just need to go sit in a field. And at the time I thought, what the heck are you talking about? And
Yeah.
so I went to go sit in this field, and I remember like my whole body reacted. I was like, I don't feel safe. This doesn't feel good. Like everything came up that had already been sitting there, but I had never been silent enough to hear it. And so I think to your point of your meditation practice, that for me looked like, am I actually listening to myself, or am I just constantly distracting to never actually have to sit with myself? And
Yeah.
so the thing I will also preface, which, I don't know about you, but it was not like pretty. Like it wasn't like you know, meditating in the corner, like
No.
feeling euphoria. Like this was like me feeling so scared to sit with myself, which is such a weird feeling, but like uncontrollably crying. And I thought, what is this?
Yep.
Awful anxiety of just like my body shaking. And I'm like, okay, just sit through it, like work through it. And I remember I said to George, we joke about it now, but I was like, you literally opened the floodgates and now I can't close it because I
Yep.
am quickly crying all the time, or like I'll
Yep.
quickly, speak to an emotion because I'm way more in tune now than I ever have been. But now it's an okay process. Now it's an enjoyable process. There's still hard days when, things are stressful. But at the time, it was so messy and ugly
Yeah.
and truthfully painful that
Yeah.
I thought, is this what people talk about when they say sit in stillness? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot that in general in us we're navigating that we never allow any light to show.
Absolutely.
And so then when you create that space, like for you in meditation or for me with, stillness or with ice baths and things like that, it's so presencing, but you have to also be, I think, just as much in the vision and the what's possible and what I could do with my life. It's so beautiful and exciting. There's also this dark part, which
Mhm.
is the fear, the overwhelm, the stress, the limiting beliefs, the programming. Like there's also just as much to the beauty that's sitting inside you. There's also this other darkness side of like, what are things that I really have been struggling with that I haven't given any time or attention to?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I like we all have that, and it has
Mhm.
to get dealt with, right? And for me, like one of the first signs of like me not dealing with it is I get pains in my fingers. I get really bad pains in my fingers, right? Which is nobody's ever heard that, but when I have like unprocessed emotions, I like my hands literally start to hurt. So when that happens, like okay, you have a ways to go. And after my company, Evolve Air, the supplement company, after it went bankrupt and after I folded that, I realized I was running for 3 years, trying to save it, trying to get out of whatever I was in, then going through the process of liquidating all of that. And my hands were just so much excruciating pain. And only now, the past couple of months, have I been able to cry for what had happened for 3 years because I was holding it, and I was bottling it up. But like, yeah, to your point, like it is so messy if you, especially if you let it sit there for so long, and if you let it linger and you don't deal with it, it will eventually come up. It will eventually shackle you and chain you. So like you
Mhm.
got to deal with yourself. You have to deal with your emotions. Right.
Yeah. So agree. So agree. Neal, obviously everything you shared today, there's just so much. I feel like everyone needs to come back and listen again because it's just there's so many nuggets along the way. You obviously have achieved a lot, and in the essence of the literal name of our show, ambitious. One of the things that I would love to ask you is just like what's been a hidden cost of ambition for you? So, the reason I ask is I think that when people hear stories like yours, they see accolades like yours, they see achievements like yours. All of us can really anchor onto that highlight reel. We can really anchor onto, okay, like, great, I want to be able to achieve this number or to achieve this status and achievement. But I think that, today you've experienced and you've gone through a lot and you still ended up on top. But I'm curious with all of the story and with everything that you've learned and gone through and all the insights you've collected along the way, what would you say to the person who is very ambitious, who wants to
Yeah.
achieve a lot, is probably something that you would say has been the biggest cost to all that you've achieved and done?
Really, really cool question. I got two. I got two that really come up immediately. Number one is you could do anything, but you can't do everything. I think with ambitious people, like we have a lot of aspirations to do a lot of things. And what I realize is that like right now, I cannot be a professional fighter. Like I love kickboxing, I love jujitsu. That's the season I'm in. Past 5 years, I can't be a professional fighter. Do I want to? The idea of that sounds kind of cool. But if I want to build an 8 figure or 9 figure business, which is ultimately what I want to do, I can't. I cannot be a professional fighter. And I think that's one of the most painful pills to swallow for people is um, you could do anything, but you can't do everything. So, like in the name of stillness, sit with yourself, figure out where you want to go, and pursue that, right? And then figure out how all these other pieces of your life will integrate and fit together to create that perfect life. But like, you're not going to be the best in the world at two things. It's just not going to happen. Maybe, if you're like extraordinary and exception to the rule, but for most people, like you can't do everything. You can do anything, but not everything. I think the second one, and I would actually say this is the bigger one, is when you say that you are responsible, you are risking having to say that I was irresponsible, which is a lot more painful than saying I was not responsible, right? So if you're going to take full ownership of something in your life, if you're going to say, hey, I want to win big, you're going to risk losing. You're going to risk having to say, yeah, I messed that one up. So just know that if you're going to go in the arena and play a big game, you also may lose big and it may hurt like a lot, like a lot, a lot. So
That
just know that.
last one, I'm like, I'm gonna come back and journal on that one. That's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. And just like it's always the simple wording that gets us, but the simple wording of that is massive. It's massive
Yeah.
because it's true. People talk about take radical responsibility. It's like, but there's also the other side of that coin that is also something you're accepting the process.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Yep.
good. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Kind
Well,
of scary,
Neal, if somebody wants to connect with you more and just to kind of get more access to you into your world, where is the best place for them to reach out to you?
Yeah. Instagram is great. Neal.Thakkar, Neal.Thakkar. Neal.Thakkar. DM me on Instagram.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I will say just for you listening, today was a really just like incredible story and such amazing just like insights and shares and lessons and like one-liners. I feel like there's like a lot of you have a lot of quotable things that need to be on a t-shirt. Just saying. Just saying.
There you go.
But to a lot of like really quotable moments today. And so I also want to just invite anybody who is listening right now to reach out to Neal. One of the things that I think is so powerful when we have these aha moments or we have these quotes or these lines that resonate with us is to also to share those and to be witnessed within those, because it really does allow that insight and that aha moment to land even deeper for you. So Neal, thank you so much for coming on today. This was amazing.
Thank you. That was so much fun. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. Well, guys, we will see you on next week's episode, and as always, stay ambitious.